So we're going to change pace a little bit now. We talked earlier today about the really impressive growth being seen by independent PR firms, and we're going to be joined on stage by 6 representatives of independent PR firms that are all growing really well, and maybe they can share some secrets into how and why they're doing that. But perhaps more importantly, they're going to talk about how important it's been for them to become more global, because I think, as many of you in this room would know, coming from independent PR firms, we live in a world now where you can't just concentrate on your local market. So I'd like to invite up onto the stage, please, Charles Lewington, who is the MD of Hanover Communications, Tanya Hughes, the president of SERMO Communications, and indeed the head of Talk PR, Elise Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Communications Group and Dentsu Aegis PR Network, Andrey Barannikov, who's the CEO of Russia's SPN Communications, Nitin Mantri, who heads India's Avian Media, and Cesare Valli, who is the head of Italy's SEC. Thank you all. Do we have enough chairs? I think so. Okay, thank you all. So all of you excellent independent PR firms, growing really well in your local markets. Life is good. But let's start off perhaps by asking what you're doing in terms of building a global offer, given that none of you, of course, are part of holding groups and have offices, or most of you indeed, don't have offices in other countries. So Charles, if I could start with you, please.
Yeah, so to cut to the chase, some of you may have heard that we're launching a new network of independent agencies today called the Ecosystem. And I want to use this short slot to explain the business rationale, which may be of interest to owners in the room, and then touch on the principles. So Hanover is a corporate communications and public affairs agency. It's about $13 million revenues this year. We have a team of digital and data visualization running through the whole business. We have offices in London and Brussels, and we touch a lot of sectors typical of companies of my kind: financial services, FMCG, energy, technology, media and telecoms, and brand communications and market access for global pharma in the UK and Europe are a particular sweet spot. So the directors and I want to double the size of the business by 2018, and as a team we believe that there is more than enough growth in our existing markets without setting up offices or distribution channels in other countries. So, for example, we're launching a new sports practice and a new offer for fast growth technology companies. So many of you in the room will understand that if you develop over the years strong client relationships, they ask you to do more and more things. So we've got a number of global customers that we work with where we have more than 5 budget holders in the business. And this is a growing feature of many relationships, including and particularly big pharma, who are busy consolidating budgets across Europe. And the most frequently asked question we get is, who do you work with who's good across the EU single market and Russia? So far from being a defensive measure, the network is essential for my business strategy going forward. So to retain the confidence of our global customers, we need friends. And we found great friends, brilliant agencies for the niche we occupy, many who need no introduction here, Atrevia in Spain and Latin America, my friend Andrey, who runs a brilliant agency, SPN Communications in Russia, Noesis in Italy, Nava in the Nordics, and lesser-known firms that deliver outstanding client work like Thomas Marco in France, IPSA in Germany, Vision Group in Poland, and Dortok in Turkey, and Acanto in Belgium. They're all undisputed corporate and public affairs specialists with a passion for digital. So our own will ask, well, you know, I'm sure, why do we need another one when we have PROI and WorldCom and the rest? I would say 3 reasons why. A lot of existing networks are barred to new entrants. Or they don't include consultancies of the kind we want to partner with, or have, on the odd occasion, fallen into disrepair. But most importantly, we want to build a network as a living, constantly evolving body of like-minded businesses committed to growth. So we asked ourselves, What if a network was based not just on complementary service lines or competence, but actually on shared values? A network committed to training project managers and account managers across borders, and obviously committed to robust models for measuring customer satisfaction that we can market collectively. Anastasia Toll, who many of you know, has provided Hanover with invaluable support, and indeed Tanya has used your SERMO network as a role model, you'll be pleased to know. So we pinched your ideas. So all the ecosystem members are represented here today, which has been great. If dinner last night was anything to go by, we'll get on like a house on fire, not least because many of us are smokers. And our second meeting will be a training and mentoring program in London in February. The dictionary definition of an ecosystem is, and listen to this, a group of independent but interrelated elements comprising a unified whole. And I think that is a very good description of what we're trying to do. Some even might say it's quite a good descriptor brand to try and separate us out from the alphabet soup of existing networks. So none of us can claim to live up to the many years of experience that many of you have running networks. Least of all me. So please share your own network experiences and take a look at our new website, www.theecosystem.org. It looks better on a tablet than it does on a mobile phone.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's very interesting to see another independent network launch, and you did answer my question about why we need another one, so thank you. Tanya, so this is, if any of you are thinking of building an independent network, this is apparently the one you should be copying.
I want commission for this.
Right. Good luck. Tanya, tell us how you've cracked your global challenge by bringing together firms from around the world to form SERMO.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for the flattery of imitation. First of all, actually, I'd like to say that I think ecosystem is a great name. I mean, it really kind of does what it says on the tin, sort of thing. And you might be wondering what the hell SERMO means, because it's not a name that springs to mind. SERMO actually means talk in Latin. And Latin, obviously, is was the original kind of global language. The network was set up by Talk PR, which is my company. But we didn't want to call it Talk PR's global network because we don't own any of the businesses in it. And so, we want to allow each constituent part to shine. So we wanted something neutral. So SERMO seemed a good name for the network. But anyway, before I tell you why we set it up, just three things about this image here I'd like to point out. First of all, that it is a rather gorgeous, sparkly Swarovski crystal map. And there's a reason for that. It's because we work exclusively in the luxury, lifestyle, fashion, beauty, high-end automotive, and other kind of luxury and travel sectors. So, we are fit for purpose. We're very specialist and have the sensibility to work in those sectors. Second thing is, I think there's a pretty good spread around the world, and that's taken a long time to do. We've been working on this for 6 or over 7 years, really, in the planning. And these partners have grown sort of one by one over time as we've gone and found them and made friends and found sort of people like us. And so we're now 15 partners, I think it's 17 countries, a couple of the partners are in 2, and about 20 cities around the world. So I wouldn't say we're complete, but I think that's quite good global coverage for our global clients. And then the third thing is that line, a network built on relationships, not ownerships. It's incredibly important for us that we have powerful relationships with our partners, because, of course, we don't have the jurisdiction of a big global network to say to our partners, you have to do things in a certain way. We have to get to know and trust our partners, that they will be working at the same level, have the same sensibilities, same sorts of clients, same sorts of cultures. So you can only do that if you actually spend the time getting to know your partners. So that's a little bit about the network. So we set up the network a few years ago because we had to, actually. I mean, one of our biggest clients is Procter & Gamble. Big global client, big global brands, lots of which are in the luxury lifestyle space. And they basically said to us, we love you because you are specialist, highly connected in your market, very connected to influencers and media, which is very important in the fashion industry. Sylvia talked about it earlier on. But we need scale. Big global businesses need scale. They need a global perspective, and we love you, but you haven't got that, so unless you become global, it's bye-bye Procter & Gamble work. So that was a pretty big incentive to do something about it. So we didn't have the cash to go and buy other companies. We didn't have the cash to even send our people around the world to set up on their own. So we set about, through Procter & Gamble, to other influencers, to other clients, finding agencies like us, and formed an alliance. And it's really grown from there. And then how we did that was, well, I spent a lot of time on a plane, going to see people. And then as people gradually join, and by the way, there is exclusivity in each market. So again, that's another kind of challenge to setting up an independent network. You have to find the one, and it can only be one in each market. You invite them to join the club. Each of us pays a small administration fee so that we have a network manager in London. I run an annual conference every year, so we mentioned coming to that, where we sort of share ideas and practices. So it's working pretty well. I'm really proud to be part of this network, because I know on the big networks, it can, a lot of your time spent on kind of politics and solving problems, and some territories are better than others. Well, in our case, honestly, they're all brilliant, and I love it and love working with these guys. So.
Okay, thank you. Elise, you're obviously not an independent anymore, in a way. After selling, I think it was 3 years ago, to Dentsu, which is now Dentsu Aegis. Why did you take that step, I guess, given that before you sold, you were one of the top independent PR firms in the US, and how's that helped you in terms of building a global offering?
Well, good question. Our firm is 20 years old this year, and I would love to convince you I was 10 when I started the firm, but I was just a little bit older than that. But 18 years we were independent, and we've been approached by many of you all, as many of you all have been, by bigger firms, holding companies to buy us. And I'd always said no. I really never wanted to sell. I loved being independent, very compelling culture, terrific big brand clients, and but I began to think in the back of my mind there was something that was keeping me awake at night. And it was a little bit of what you described, which is these great brands that we have need they need scale. They need you to be able to have some sense of international reach. And we weren't. We were very dominant in the US, very proud of that, but we didn't have an ability to work overseas. And I actually thought about buying companies myself. I thought about it. Sending people from Mitchell out to other countries to do all of that. And I kept thinking that's a disaster waiting to happen, because I don't know how to operate in other countries. And so I began to think if there would ever be a buyer that would be a benevolent buyer for us that saw the chance to help Mitchell go global, that would be what I would want to do. And that was when I met Andrey from Dentsu, at the time, just Dentsu. And he was acquiring, and had been for the last decade or so, to build out and westernize Dentsu's holdings from Japan, and was doing that very successfully, acquiring really best-in-class agencies in other parts of the Marcom space. But they had this gap in PR, and he'd been looking for the right agency to take that would be more entrepreneurial nature, that wanted to grow and build. And so we were a perfect fit for each other. And that was at the end of 2012, so it's been almost 3 years. And it's been an interesting journey, because the first year that I was working with Tim, we set about to buy as many good firms as we could in different spaces, and I had a real terrific strategy for a network put together. And all at about that same time, they bought Aegis Media, which probably many of you are aware of the Aegis group. They were based in the UK, primarily in media and digital companies, but they had no PR either. So those two groups came together, which is now Dentsu Aegis Network. We doubled in size. We became a very large global network. And we all took last year kind of off to get to know each other and sit around the table and figure out who these brands are that we now have as sister agencies. And we began to explore this concept of how we could cross-sell together and be very collaborative. And we knew that would be a huge differentiator, because most of the other large groups do not. And so we tried to decide how would be the best way to make that happen. And within that umbrella, we began to see the opportunity to come back again to the idea of growing out PR. And about this time last year, one of the things I did was, as we now had this new group that had come together to form Dentsu Aegis Network, was, are there PR people, PR professionals within the Aegis group that we could begin to tap into. And so I did an audit, and I found PR professionals in 9 countries. And I realized then we already have a global network of PR professionals. Adele Banderas here today. She's within our ICCO brand. She sits here in Milan. There's Adele. And we have people in Australia, China, India, Italy, Russia, Thailand, Malaysia, and of course Japan. Dentsu PR is in Japan. That's kind of the mothership. And so we were really excited about that. We began to figure out ways that we began to work together. Could we pitch together? Could we share intel about clients from different countries? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But at least you are a community together now within this new network family. So our primary focus is on trying to push revenue opportunities through each other, through our existing PR assets. But we still want to buy. And we still also do partner with independent firms like Rachel Bell of Shine. She and our firms have worked together on a number of occasions to serve global client needs. So we sort of do a little bit of both. We have some best-in-class practices that are probably just more fit to purpose for clients than anything else.
Okay. Andrey, you've got an interesting story as well. It's one of the biggest PR firms in Russia. Your services, I suspect, are regularly in demand when it comes to international PR firms looking for support in that country. You were, in fact, part of the Ogilvy PR network. That association, I think, ended 2 years ago, and now you've joined the ecosystem. So perhaps you'd like to tell us why you made those decisions.
Thanks, Aaron. Actually, I tried to remember the panel session on the same discussion 2 years ago in Paris. And, well, I don't see so many changes. Elise became more beautiful, no doubt about this. And I'm at the time was as a general manager of SPN Ogilvy. You're absolutely right, Arun. And I was standing for the networks strongly. And if you ask me whether I changed my mind, because for the last 2 years we operate as an independent company, I would say no, of course not. I was standing for the networks, and I'm still standing for the networks, and I will stand for the networks. As Arun mentioned, we are one of the oldest companies in Russia, and this year we have a small jubilee, 25 years already on the market. And since 2005 up to 2013, we worked as an Ogilvy PR affiliate, and it was absolutely great experience for us, absolutely great. Why I'm standing for the networks, and why when actually we got the proposal from Charles to join the ecosystem, why we decided to try. A couple of reasons. First of all, client needs, because more or less all our clients here, they're mostly agencies here in this room, all our clients more or less they need some global services. And as Jeremy mentioned, thanks for this fantastic presentation, as Jeremy mentioned that we need to provide more global needs every particular day. Right now, for example, we have 6-7 clients in Russia who on a day-to-day basis need services outside of Russia, especially in terms of what's going on with the political situation, with the economy situation in Russia, and so on, so on, so on. So Russian companies, they need to prove now, especially in terms of PR, that they are still stable and with a very good reputation. And in these circumstances, of course, it is very, very difficult to work only on the basis of the Russian team. Obviously, we need some partners. And I remember how we worked with Ogilvy, and actually it was a really great experience, as I already mentioned. But from time to time, of course, you see that there can be some problem, not on the level, for example, of GM Russia and GM China and GM US, but there can be some problems on the level of the account directors or even senior account managers, because depending on the account, we are not able to promise all the time that our account would be carried by, let's say, by the first person, by the second person. In these particular circumstances, of course, the network of the independent agencies, which are relatively smaller than the, let's say, top 5 or top 10. Of course, it gives more opportunity, more chances that the first person in the agency or the second person in the agency would take care more of your account, which is obviously great for the client. That's one reason. The second reason, of course, the staff, because yesterday, Gunther, are you here? He's not here today. Gunther told me a very interesting story about the corporate party he organized for his team in Austria just a couple of weeks ago. Don't go into so many details, but actually we need to think how we can make the work in our agency more interesting for our people, for our teams, because it looks like with every particular year, they become more and more, I'm sorry to say, lazy. They become more and more not interested in doing their work, sorry to say. And yesterday, the story that he told me, I can say that it's the same story can happen in Russia or in Italy or in any other country in the world. What are the particular interests for us, how to make them happy with their work? Not only with day-to-day work with their client, obviously. So one of the particular reasons of the network is, of course, we have such a possibility to, for example, to exchange people between the companies. And yesterday we had the meeting of the ecosystem, and one of the suggestions which with which I totally agree is to exchange, to realize the exchange program, like 2 account managers from each company go to some other country, and we're getting back somebody from Europe, or and so on and so on and so on. Definitely it works, because we did this with Ogilvy, we know how it works, and it works always. Great people are coming with absolutely new quality after they spent 3-4 months in the other team. So obviously, not so many changes around. Even we know, we are now not SPN Ogilvy, we are SPN Communications. Still, some of the clients call us SPN Ogilvy, sorry to say, but 2 years passed, but nevertheless. So we are happy to feel ourselves now the part of the independent network, and I will always stand for the globalization of our business. Otherwise, we are, too local. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nitin, how do you ensure that Avian, to put it in Andrey's words, is not too local? Because it seems like with India, often the network requirement is in one direction more often than not, in terms of business coming into the country rather than being exported outwards.
I think, I'd speak for all of us here. I think we're all local at heart, but with global aspirations. Mm-hmm. And I think independence does give us the independence freedom. And that freedom gives us freedom from process, if you're not part of a big group, and freedom to be creative. And that's what we've all spoken about in the last day and a half. How do you, so for us, for example, in India, it's slightly more complex and a little more peculiar, because a lot of our clients are working out of the bigger groups. While they have global agencies out of the US or out of Europe, but they are still working with independent agencies. And I think it's about India because it's a more peculiar market, a little more complex, and they search for local expertise. So, we have clients who work with probably with Omnicom and WPP agencies or IPG across the world, but in India they still continue to work with us or with some other independent agencies. How do we ensure that we're not too local? I think independent networks, great idea. Should you have only one agency per country? I'm not so sure, actually. Because I think, end of the day, it's about expertise, which the client is looking for. We're not great at financial communications, right? So if we're part of a network who wanted a financial communications partner, we probably may not be we won't say no, of course, but we probably may not be the right person, right? And so it's maybe not be a bad idea to have a couple of expert agencies who pretty much cover the gamut of different expert areas. For example, our public affairs firm is a member of the FIPRA network, right? So it's a specific expertise that a client is looking for, and he gets that. Secondly, I think for independents to go out. I mean, in India, we've seen one independent agency now starting operations in Singapore and in the Middle East. I think we have to build out from regional perspective. So, for example, if we were to go out, it will probably be looking at South Asia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal. We're already doing a lot of work there. Probably look at Middle East and start kind of go out from that perspective. Finally, I think you're right. A lot of business comes into India, but I think it's going to change soon. It is changing now. And a lot of our clients are looking outward. A lot of clients, international clients, are looking at APAC as a region to run comms out of India. And that's what's going to change.
And I suspect that's a change we're seeing in many of the so-called emerging markets that
yes.
are now exporting business around the world and requires you to have resources in place in other countries?
Absolutely. We've already worked with a couple of clients in other markets with partners.
Okay. Cesare, so you spent a long time at Hill & Knowlton here in Italy, but moved this year to SEC. So really interesting, because obviously Hill & Knowlton is like the classic big network, grew all around the world, often by acquisition, sometimes by not. Now you've joined SEC, which rarely for a European PR firm is growing by buying other agencies in other markets. SEC has actually bought firms in, I think, France, Spain, and Germany, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So you've chosen to grow by acquisition in Europe specifically. Perhaps you'd like to tell us why.
Yeah, yes, thank you. First of all, let me say, we are moved by appetite. I mean, we are pretty strong in Italy, but Italy is nowadays a good market, very good market, but not big enough. And we don't want to repeat the mistakes that many Italian companies have done in the last 30, 40 years to become too big in this country and not big enough or not even present abroad. I can just name one person, the Berlusconi Group, just to give you one example, but I can give you many others. So we have appetite for growth. We have appetite for a larger market. And therefore, we decided that we should, do something to take a bit of part of that market. Then, even our people want more opportunities. And another very important driver is to give opportunity to grow to our people who is fully dedicated to the company, who, are very stable, they work like mad, and we have an obligation to give them opportunities. And then we have the same obligation with our clients, because we serve, thanks God, a very good number of clients, Italian multinationals, or not yet multinational, but becoming multinationals. The best part of the Italian market, who is growing fast, is because they are exporting a lot. So we serve many of them, but we even serve a number of global multinationals in this country. So we have contact with many clients who have a need abroad. So we decided that we have to do something, and we decided to begin our own way to grow, which is to acquire. So we have acquired 3 companies the last couple of years. We believe that we have a different model going forward. We do not acquire 100% of the company we want to acquire, because unlike some of the very important global network, we would like to maintain a full and very important involvement of the people who knows the markets and operates in the market. So we want to establish a real partnership with all these companies, and we believe that this is a positive way forward. So far, the results are pretty good, so we are encouraged to continue to do that. So far, we have financed ourselves, our growth. I don't know if this will continue to be, but if we want to accelerate, probably we will have to do to raise capital and so on and so forth. But that is the direction we are going. There is another small consideration, or if you like, a small dream. When I started my career a long time ago in an advertising company, and I have spent all my life working for Anglo-American companies, I mean, creativity was something which was coming from the Anglo-Saxon culture, apart few local examples. And, we learned a lot, and that was the model. But I believe that in the last few years, and Cannes Lions is a very good example of that, creativity is coming from, very different parts of the world. And therefore, this is even changing the way all the communication world is communicating. And frankly speaking, I have a question that I keep posing myself. I mean, Italy is very strong in fashion, very strong in design, very strong, you name them, but we're not so present in the creativity conversation, let's say, all over the world. So a bit of a dream is even to try to bring a bit of, not necessarily the Italian, but the Mediterranean culture within the global discussion and global world of communication.
Thank you all. I'm a little mindful of time because we started this session late and I actually have a plane to catch, but we'll run on for a little bit.
It's so global, Aaron.
To Luton Airport, it's really not that glamorous. So we did ask a question. If you were an independent agency owner, what would be your strategy for expanding your global capability? And 56% said that they would join an existing network of independents or create my own network. And the second most popular was selling my agency to a holding group. So I think that kind of reflects, in a way, what we've just heard here. Becoming an affiliate of an existing global agency scores much lower. So I think that finding really reflects what we've heard. So maybe if we move on, I wanted to ask maybe another question, and then we can perhaps open it up to the floor. And I'd ask you all to be as concise as possible, please. Sometimes with these, when I talk to people about the networks they're setting up and the affiliations and so on, there's an aspiration to compete perhaps with, the big global PR agency networks, the Weber Shandwigs or the Ketchums and so forth. But surely that's not a realistic goal for any of these types of networks. I'll start with you, Elise.
The goal is to win the brands you want.
Okay.
We want to win the brands we want, and we want to win the brands that we can serve most effectively. I've always said, I remember when I started Mitchell so many years ago, and people said, wow, did you ever think you were going to get to be so big? I said, never, and it was never the goal. The goal was to be the best at something. Whatever you thought you could do uniquely well, I wanted to be the absolute best at it. And what I learned along the way is that growth follows success. And so I think you can get very diverted if you think about, oh, I have to get to a certain size and I need to be in all these different markets, because then all of a sudden you're so scattered. And what are you really good at? You still have to have an incredibly compelling offer for clients. And so what we have done is looked within our new family now, this new Dentsu Aegis network, and we have a very specific grid of top clients and who is the best fit for what client and who can introduce one agency to another. So we've introduced a lot of agencies to our big brand clients because they think they have something compelling to offer them. So I think you have to stay very focused on what you do well and can be the best at, and that gives you an entree to the brands that are the right fit for you.
Okay. Charles, tell me perhaps why the ecosystem is not just going to try and be another global PR network or indeed an agency with flags in different markets.
Well, we don't really have that objective just at the moment. We're very focused on, as I say, Russia and the EU single market, where there is a real demand for independent agencies. I mean, we don't really compete very much with the Weber Shandwigs of this world, so we would like to have the capability to do that on more occasions. And I think I'm sort of modest enough to recognize that, I think global ambitions could be put on hold for a few years. I'm quite conservative with a small c in the way that I built the business. I like to consolidate in existing markets before necessarily scampering off into other markets. Mm-hmm. But I think once the ecosystem has filled out the holes in the network, then I think we would be well placed to compete against Weber Shandwick if indeed it was a brand that we wanted to bid for collectively.
Wow, well, you heard it here first. Weber better watch out. Tanya, tell us maybe, what is you've spent a lot of time, I know, and effort putting together your network. What's the biggest challenge you faced in doing that?
I think finding the right partner. Sorry, can I just come back to this competing with big networks question? Because we do and we don't compete with the big networks. I mean, we're different. And in fact, Hill and Knowlton are here. I know Richard's in the audience. Richard's worked for many, many years with Adidas. But Adidas also has a range of Stella McCartney, Adidas by Stella McCartney, which of course sits more in the fashion and luxury space. So we work on that. So as a network, we work on Adidas by Stella McCartney, and Richard works on Adidas, and that's fine. I mean, that fits the client. So there's plenty of business to go around. But I think what clients who have specialist brands and very niche and markets that require a certain sensibility, that's when they need kind of people like us. And so we can perfectly well sit alongside and occasionally compete with the big networks when the kind of one-size-fits-all sort of generalist approach isn't right for the client. But back to your question, the most difficult thing, is finding the right partner. But, we find partners through relationships that then lead to other relationships. So it's always through referral, always through, knowledge, of existing client relationships. And we build from there. I mean, across the network, I think we've got about 46, maybe 47 clients who work with at least 2 or 3 of the partners. But it doesn't all come from us. It's not all out in the centre. It goes, like a sort of spider's web around the network. So it's all about connections and finding the right people. But we're courting someone at the moment, I can't say who's been approached all the time to be bought, but is fiercely independent and doesn't want to be bought. But is so independent, doesn't want to be part of a network either. So that's a bit annoying. So it is very hard to find people who are great, really great agencies, that feel like us, but who want to join in as well. And you need people who've got that sort of that desire to be part of something bigger and part of something more global.
It's interesting you use the phrase "people that feel like us." Seems to me that for any of these networks to work, there has to be not just uniform quality, but kind of cultural cohesion. You need that similar mindset. Yeah. So, Andrey, aside from drinking together, how do you get that to work?
Well, drinking is also quite an important issue. I think that Tanya mentioned a very, very proper thing that we all need to think about our comfort, because it depends on the personality. It depends on your personal attitude to the business you run or to the network you join, because probably you can earn another 5-10 million euros, but you would be absolutely stressed with the rules of the company you're in, or vice versa. You can be in your own niche, but you can feel yourself absolutely comfortable. So, in my personal understanding, I felt myself absolutely comfortable in Ogilvy. I feel myself comfortable when I'm independent and I join the new network. So, of course, it depends on with whom you deal. On the particular personality, who is your main contact person in the network. I remember some really fabulous people in Ogilvy PR, whom I still remember as one of the best professionals I have ever met. So, of course, a lot depends on the relations, on the personalities you deal with.
Cesare, how big a factor is that for you with the firms you're buying?
This is a very fundamental point. With Hill & Knowlton, I had the chance to make a number of acquisitions, and I know one of the fundamental things is really put the people working together and forming a new culture, which is a challenge we have in front of us, because frankly speaking, I mean, financing an acquisition is the easier part. It's much more important how to build a common culture, how to build a common view, common goals, within the differences, which has a formidable asset. So I believe that the best things comes out of the exchange of views, exchange of culture. So diversity is a formidable asset, but that needs to be forming a one view in order to work together. We know, I mean, every big network, every big multinational have a problem, which is to assure the same level of services all over the network. That is a difficult game. And of course, it's a difficult game for us as well, because we have less experience in doing that. And that is the fundamental thing we have to do. And I agree. I mean, spending time together is a fundamental thing network and companies has to do to form the spirit, because I have learned that people do not and never work together because they have the same name on the door. They work together well when they know each other, they trust each other, and they like to work one with the other. That is fundamental.
And Nitin, lastly, this takes time and money, putting this effort into going around to, whether it's conferences like this or interagency meetings. I see you in lots of places around the world. How do you do that whilst also running a successful agency?
Talent, right? If you have the right people who can run your agency while you're traveling across the world or across the country, it's much easier. But yeah, to be honest, yeah, I mean, I think Richard earlier talked about running a business 24/7. I think, that's what we do, and it does work. I think building a network, and I think coming back to the first question on aspirations, I think no aspiration is small. And I think any network, any independent network can compete with a larger group. I think the network needs to define if what Charles was saying, if ecosystem can actually be beyond an annual conference and do the exchange programs, the trainings, and the knowledge sharing, then yes, absolutely. But time and money, I think if every agency in that network can provide some kind of financial input towards that, then it will work, absolutely.
Thank you. I think we've got time just for one question before we break for lunch. If anyone wants to ask anything of these fabulous independent PR firms.
Got no microphone, so they'll have to shout.
Or they could just do it via you, via the medium of Steve.
You can take this one.
No? We'll want lunch.
To be hungry, yes.
I think so. We'll keep you from your food no longer. Please join me in thanking our excellent panel. Thank you all.